Yeah, come on down. Another round of applause. All right, well, that was incredibly powerful. Why don't we start with some introductions? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this incredibly powerful project.
Sure. I think I might first start. Hello. I'm Mitakoyape, Yvonne Russo Imachiapi. My name's Yvonne Russo, and I'm the director and producer of the story. And before I say anything, I really want to first acknowledge some people that are here in the audience who are a big part of the creative team. And if I could please have you stand up. Kaya Dillon, our cinematographer, please stand up. Yay! Gabriel Noble, please stand up. Our Recreations producer and my co-director of Recreations. Justin Deegan, where are you? Please stand up. Second assistant camera. Kevin Killer, straight from Pine Ridge. Come on, stand up. All right, a researcher and fixer. Macaline White Bear, are you here, Macaline? Yay, Macaline, stand up. Macaline's Annie Mae's good friend. Is Annie Mae's good friend and in the movement. Yeah. So she's in all the other episodes, 2, 3, 4.
Gotta get to episode 2.
Yes, yes. Fred Youngbear, are you here? Fred Youngbear, I want you to just stand up. He was one of the first phone calls I made because he has been around the movement for a long time, and I want to thank you for your support. I'm trying to think of who else is here. Leanne's father. He's here. Thank you so much for representing Leanne, our additional camera, assistant camera. So thank you so much, everybody, for all of your contributions to the project. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, maybe we should start off with kind of what brought you to this project, what inspired you. How did you first learn of Annie Mae?
Well, I grew up with Annie Mae's story. It's a story that has been around Indian country for decades. And it's a story that is one of Indian country's notorious crime stories, but also widens out the lens in terms of the injustices as seen through Annie Mae's eyes. And the story I grew up with, I was around 9 when I was living on the Rosebud Reservation. And again, it was a story that was kept silent. But fast forward to 2018, after decades of being in the film industry, the project was brought to me by Caroline Waterlow and Amy Kaufman, Amy was the first to actually visit Denise, Annie Mae's daughter, and go and see her and ask her if we can tell the story. And so once she received that permission and it was time to bring a team together, that's when they had contacted me early on. And that's when I joined the team, and I thought, who knew after all these years that this story would come? And it wasn't like I just said yes, it was, I had to consult because it was so close to home. As you know, our Native community is very small. Everybody knows everybody, and we're all connected, right? Mitakoyasin. And so I had to call home, and I had to ask questions, and I had to really dig deep to see, are we ready for this? But also I had to consult with Denise as well. So I went to go meet with Denise and spend some time with the family. And when I really learned about her journey in terms of seeking justice for her mother, but after 30 years of not getting answers as to what happened to her mom, I was like, this should not happen to anybody. Like that's telling us our justice system has failed us if we're not seeking answers to missing loved ones, right? Or murdered loved ones. And so So that's when I knew there was a lot to unearth here, and that's when I knew it was time to tell the story.
Yes, so we, as Yvonne mentioned, we have another producing partner in this project, Amy Kaufman, who could not be here today. But, you know, she and I, she is someone who actually comes from a scripted background, and so but she came upon the story, and as Yvonne said, met with Denise, and she sought me out as a documentary producer. I've been working in documentaries for 20 plus years, and I also really particularly love history and archival material, working with archival material and doing all that research. I came into filmmaking as a researcher. So that was sort of high, and I actually am Canadian originally and from Montreal, but I spent a lot of time actually when I was growing up in Nova Scotia, and so I felt a sort of personal, it felt like, oh, I maybe am supposed to somehow be part of this, and it was, you know, such an honor to have Denise allow us to do this, and obviously the most important part was to have a director. It had to be told from an Indigenous female perspective. And we met Yvonne, and it all sort of came together that way. And I'm, you know, unlike Yvonne, I was sort of horrified, having grown up in Canada, that I didn't know anything about Annie Mae, and I had never heard her story, and I didn't know, so I felt sort of ashamed of that and wanted to fix that, and was so happy and honored to be a part of telling her story and bringing it to a new generation. And as Yvonne said, it was just sort of time to reconcile some history.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, speaking of history too, this seems like a history that doesn't really get talked about very much, the AIM movement, right? And I talked to a lot of students, and it seems like the last thing they learned about Native American history is like the Trail of Tears of like 1830, right? But they don't realize there's so much history after that and it doesn't really get talked about. So I'm wondering, you know, throughout this process of creating this project, what was your research approach like? I mean, you have tons of archival types of things. What kind of special considerations did you make when using that and selecting that? What was that like for you?
That was one of the first, I knew in order to tell a story, it had to be told by the people. The people have to tell the story. This is your story. This is an elder story. This is our ancestor story. This is a story where the voices should speak for themselves, you know? And so I was like, you know, that was number one. So the first question was, is there enough archive out there in the world, not local, just in the world, that we can source to see if we can put pieces together? Like, let's see this. So we were fortunate enough to receive grants in the beginning, you know, through Nia Taro, the Redford Center, the IDA, Sundance, Doc Grant, and we were able to use that funding to hire an archival producer, Amy Rockefeller, who's really awesome, and she like sourced everywhere. And one day, like when I was on board as a director, the drive was sent to me, and it had like hundreds of hours of archive from all over, and it took me weeks to go through every single clip and every single news source and every, you know, and sort of see like, okay, I have this much of this time and of Dennis and these leaders and who are going to be the voices. So I needed to figure that out and kind of create this mind map of everybody, and then weed people and weed times out too, because there's so many occupations that the movement was involved with that you can't just go occupation to occupation to occupation. And at the same time, it has to be Annie Mae's story and her point of view. And so it was really difficult at times because we couldn't find a lot of Annie Mae's like footage until later on, like it started to, you know, an auntie would call up and say, oh, I got some stuff over here, or guess what, you know, Amy Kaufman contacted somebody who knew somebody and they have a box over here. And so it all started to unearth itself, and then Annie Mae's voice started to emerge through it. And you'll see this is episode 1, but you know, Annie Mae builds throughout.
So I was gonna say Denise offered up these letters that Annie Mae had been writing from South Dakota, from wherever she was in the field doing work for AIM, and that was something that sort of at a certain point really unlocked, I think, a lot of things, because it suddenly was like, oh, this is a story that's been told by a lot of other people for a long time, and so to have her be able to really put her in there with her words and her voice, and then that recording is kind of an amazing thing as well. So that I felt like that was a moment of a sort of eureka moment when that started to really, you could really start to feel her and her whole kind of vibe and attitude, and it came through in the language.
Well, it's so interesting too, because a lot of Native stories get told from non-Native people, but it sounds like you had a really collective community effort to help tell the story.
Yes, and I also want to give a very special thanks to Tara Duncan, the president of Onyx Collective, Jahan Robinson. Can you stand up, Jahan? Where are you? She's here somewhere. Jahan.
Yes, Onyx.
Yes. Jade, Asante, and Quinn. But Jahan, if you want to go ahead and.
Well, yes, I was as Yvonne was saying, the grants, we spent 4 years just working on it and compiling the research, and also I wanted to say a lot of indigenous publications, which also I feel like don't get seen and heard by mainstream media enough. But that was a great resource, Akwesasne Notes and some of those kinds of publications. So we spent years developing it, and then it was really Onyx and Hulu who came on in 2021 is when we started to put that together. And to their credit, it was a hard project to get people to want to make, and they really have been incredible partners and stood behind us. And but it took all those years of getting it together to make it a sort of presentable
You have to have a
package.
a proof of concept, basically. You have to show that you have enough material to tell the story, and
that there was enough for 4 episodes. I mean, it was we wanted multiple episodes. That was the other thing, is we wanted the canvas to really go deep on the context and the history, so that you understand what Annie Mae's motivations were for joining the movement, and you understand what AIM was standing for, and you have to sort of relearn some of the background of the Department of the Interior and the war, all of that stuff is all like, the past is prologue. It's all we're living in amidst all of that all the time. So
yeah. Well, and I imagine a huge part of that, getting your project funded and supported, was trying to explain why this project is so important to tell right now. And so I'm just wondering, what were some of those conversations like? How did you say this needs to be made now?
Well, Jahan, who's brilliant, and Tara, who's brilliant, they just knew, coming from a BIPOC mandate in the sense of, they support indigenous filmmakers, BIPOC filmmakers, and you don't necessarily have to explain. They just get it. They're like, this is important. We got to tell, we support this. They see it. It was very clear. So we were, again, very fortunate to have team members.
I think there were also, there were headlines at this, the time we started working on this. It was what was going on at Standing Rock, what's been going on with the activism around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and there's a whole new generation that's really engaging, and so it felt like, so I think there were themes clearly in the ether that made it time to revisit.
Yeah, serendipitous. Yeah. I want to see if there's any audience questions.
Can I ask the audience a question?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, one question I have is, there's so many, were many of you familiar, and there's obviously people of a lot of different generations here, but did a lot of you know about like the BIA, for example, the takeover?
Yes.
So, cool, yeah. Because there was that, like the depth of it was something I was amazed by and didn't really understand. But I'm just curious how much people.
Well, so many people don't even know about the Alcatraz, right? Takeover at Alcatraz, either. We're in California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Sorry, questions,
Question.
Somebody here today?
Right up here. Yeah.
I just want to say hello, y'all, for telling the story. I grew up, I'm Nima, so I was actually looking for my uncles in your footage. It was, to me, I just knew little bits and pieces, and just how you put it together, I just think was done beautifully.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That's so meaningful. Thank you so much.
Speaking of putting together, is Jeannie Applegate here? Jeannie, if you're here, stand up. She's one of our editors of the first episode. Yay! So who you want to talk to for editorial? And Mark Becker, who's not here, but he's really a genius also, you know, because editing is like redirecting and messing things up and fixing them and putting them back together. And we had so much material to work with, and I really just respect him so much and was able to work real close with him. So yeah, Mark is a great editor.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I wonder, without giving too much away, what can we kind of expect to see moving forward in the series? No spoilers, of course, but.
Well, I guess now that, you know, episode 1 of the series is always hard because you have to lay a lot of groundwork and you want people to have information for the journey that you're going to go on. And so I think what's nice, what starts to happen as we go forward is, you know, Annie Mae can sort of takes over in terms of the bulk of the story being her POV, I guess you could say, and her.
It gets intense. It involves a little of the FBI, and it also involves there's a lot of distrust amongst the movement. So yeah, you gotta watch.
It's another question out of here.
I was just wondering around your methodology in terms of working with the family, because this is something very personal. Like, did you feel there was any resistance, or was there openness, or people ready to talk?
Yeah, once I spent time with Denise, it was important to obtain trust from the family. So before I did anything, I went to meet with her and spend time alone with her, and was able to meet Jake and you know, her niece, Annie Mae's granddaughter, and really spend time having meals together. And I asked if they would take me to where Annie Mae grew up, so I could get a sense of the land, what it was like to really capture the subtext of who she is as a person. And then it was important to just have access, you know, at different times in their life. And so I asked Denise if I didn't want to just interview her once. I said, I'm going to need to interview throughout, you know, at certain times, because I don't know, you never know exactly how your story is going to unfold. You have the one you pitch, you have the one that you shoot and you learn, you know, as you're making the film, and then you have the one in the edit, which is another thing. So you have all these versions and evolution. So I just said, we need access, and are you okay with that? And she said, yeah, and she's, yeah, amazing, really amazing.
One thing I was going to add is, yes, Denise, I don't think, none of us was interested in making something about Annie Mae if the family was not on board and didn't want to work with us. But one of the early on things that we filmed with her, I think was in 2018, is Canada had a national inquiry around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and Denise participated in that. And so that was a pretty intense time to connect with the family, and you know, they did a truth and reconciliation process there that this country we haven't done as much here, but it was a very raw, you know, it was just a very intense time. So that was just kind of interesting, you know, something that we were honored to be allowed into, you know, sort of Denise's experience with that. Definitely. Yes.
I know that this is just starting. Do you have any plans for follow-up after this documentary?
That's a big question. I can't fully answer that right now. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. You know, I think we're so immersed in this and finishing it and launching it, and please spread the word. You know, it's we'll see how the reactions are, and yeah, you know, we'll see what's next. But thank you for asking.
Hopefully it starts a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
And we'll see where those conversations, what they put into the world. Yes.
Do you know if any movies in the past that made it involve
Yeah, there's sugar cane.
movie. I forgot the name of that movie.
Yeah, sugar cane. There is one. There's one titled Sugar Cane, and it's pretty incredible. It's about all of that. Boarding school is told from a son who's seeking answers about his father. And it's making headway right now in the press, and I'm sure you'll be able to watch it on National Geographic. Yeah, now, actually.
I will say that we do talk about that in the next episode. You know, members of AIM, Dennis Banks was sent to a boarding school when he was quite young, and I think Clyde's mother. You know, a lot of people had parents, and you'll learn about the specific impact of the residential schools on Annie Mae herself and her family. So that we do talk about that in this, but it's not obviously entirely about that. But certainly there's the legacy of that permeates some of this story.
I know you talked a lot about the importance of talking to the families of the people who are involved in these projects, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for aspiring filmmakers who want to undertake similar projects. What would you tell them? Advice on their approach, maybe things you would have done differently, what worked well?
Just do it. There's no one way to do it. I think that you have to just take the first step. And whatever your story is about, if it's a documentary, you know, find out if you can interview that person. And even if it's just a raw interview with your iPhone to start off with, just so you're learning about story and their backgrounds and how it's going to enrich and expand in your mental capacity of like doing it, because it's documentaries have an energy of themselves. You know, they sort of form and they'll tell you. I think they tell you what they want to be, and so you just have to do it. There's no one way to do it. You could do it. And now you guys all have phones. You have digital technology, which is amazing, and you have access, you know, with Adobe Premiere and, you know, Creative Suites and editing capabilities and classes online, that it's right there. So now it just has to be from your thought to, you know, to actually doing it. Yeah.
And I will say, I don't think any of us thought that we would start in kind of 2017, 2018, and finally get to show it to an audience in 2024. So these things take time sometimes. So you can, I think it's a little bit of a test of how badly you want to do it and how much you want the story to be heard. It will test your abilities of how, you know, stick-to-itiveness. So you really have to kind of buckle up and go on the journey and go where it's going to tell you to go.
Right, definitely. I see a hand up there. Yeah.
So this is actually kind of answer the question earlier about the residential schools and stuff. I saw earlier this year, I think, another series called Little Bird, where they follow a whole different like point of view and stories and we have to deal with a lot of stuff. And I think I saw last year another documentary series that they're sharing. So they're trying to like pick up on that, but hopefully we can.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be more.
Yeah. Good. No, that's great to know that they're starting to be more interested in those stories. Right over here.
This one's kind of a two-parter. Would love to know when the rest of the series is available to stream. And
Tuesday the 26th of November.
I missed the first part actually. And then somewhat familiar with the case. Like, what do you guys find a lot of pushback from people outside of indigenous communities? Because I know that there was a lot of, you know, there were a lot of forces at play, obviously, but like outside of the people you were interviewing, was there, difficulties there, I guess?
We've had a lot of support, which has been great, and I think it's because the story was kept silent for decades that people are now in a place of wanting to tell the truth, or people who know something about it were willing to speak. And also, I think it's time for a truth and reconciliation and a healing. And that's the way that I've approached it as a director. And like, this isn't, this is about the healing journey for all of our ancestors and people who have walked this walk and have lived with this story. So, so for example, some FBIs, which you'll see later on, FBI guys, there's some that were like, don't call me again. I don't want, I want nothing to do with it. Do not call me again. And I was like, I wonder why. We know why.
And then we have some people who did talk to us, which was, great that they were willing to sit down and have a conversation. I mean, I think all these things are just about, if we can't have conversations about these things, like, we're not gonna, solve these problems, we're not gonna heal, we're not gonna, so, as Yvonne said, I think there was just there's a new energy, there's new young activism, there's people who wanna learn this history, and it's time to sort of tell it for a new generation, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that for us. That's incredible. Yeah. Any other final questions? I know we're close to time. Yeah, go ahead.
I know your film didn't show if the BIA made any changes or took responsibility or people were named who did all the wrongdoing. So in your next episode, if you have it, are they going to show the BAI's part in this?
I mean, sadly, I don't think a lot of people were held accountable, despite having a lot of evidence.
Changes after the takeover.
There were promises. As usual, yeah, there were promises, but the promises were never surfaced, right? Yeah, so,
But the BIA continues to be a talked about, thought about institution throughout the story.
At the very least, it keeps them accountable, right? And you've made a record of that. So again, thank you for that. That's very important work. Okay. Well, I know we're about time, but big thank you so much for everything. Yeah, I'm really grateful.
thank you guys.
Yes.
Thank you everybody for
Just
coming.
one more note, there is an after party in the VIP lounge here at